Every great creative work stands on the shoulders of giants. Welcome to RetroInspection, where we examine and find out where the things we love today came from.
Well, let's talk about it.
Okay.
This particular novella. It certainly wasn't what I expected, and I think I read some of these books some 30 odd years ago.
Yeah, you probably picked up one of those 60s paperbacks.
Right, and what exposure I had for Conan came from the Schwarzenegger movies and the Marvel comics.
Yep.
None of which I was a particular fan of. But they were, I just remember James Earl Jones being quite funny in the Conan movie.
It's a pretty good movie. I like it. I don't particularly care for the sequel, which I saw a lot more because the sequel, Destroyer, Conan the Destroyer, was much more of an HBO staple than Barbarian. But Barbarian was on there, and then of course there were 11 cajillion knockoffs. But probably the first place I encountered it would have been the Marvels, which was one of their large format black and white magazines that they sold with magazines. Because if you put them in a bigger format, they didn't count as comic books and were not subject to the Comics Code Authority. So that's why Marvel had those. So Marvel had Conan, which was Roy Thomas. I can't remember who the artist was on that. But Thomas wrote it initially and created some things. We'll circle back to that. But also they had Tomb of Dracula and something else. I think they had like 3 long-term black and white, and that was the other thing. They were all black and white. They weren't. There was no colorist on these for some reason. I don't know. Maybe that was another hedge against having them considered comic books.
Yeah, and it was probably cheaper process to print in black and white than it was in color. So there you go. But this particular story. Each of the chapters starts off with a small poem, and that surprised me. But recalling how Robert Howard was raised, it makes a heck of a lot of sense.
Oh yeah. Oh, he wrote a truckload of poetry. I don't think he ever professionally published any, but he wrote a lot. I just think he eventually figured out there was no money in it, certainly not in the circumstances of the era, and concentrated on prose work.
Well, tell us about this story. What's the summary?
Okay. So, like I said, this takes place before the chronology bounces around some over the course of the Conan stories. The first 2 deal with Conan when he has actually become king of a small nation, and then this story takes place at some earlier date, rather. Where he's just starting out, where he's a thief and he's a mercenary. And this one, he's a thief, and he finds himself in this city and up on a hill overlooking the city. There's this 150-foot tall, white, as far as anyone can tell, 100% smooth, totally featureless tower. And in that tower lives an evil wizard, who exerts such a control over the country that the actual king of the country is a terminal alcoholic, because that's the only way he can mentally and emotionally deal with the power represented by this wizard. And but the wizard's power is said to come from a fabulous jewel of some kind. Also, there's jewels all over. There's like a parapet at the top of the tower, and that's encrusted with jewels. So and also people theorize that the tower itself is made out of a valuable substance. Nobody knows, as nobody lives there except the wizard and a small cadre of security troops. But the troops aren't even the main thing that keep people away from the tower and trying to steal whatever treasure or treasures exist within it, because there are reputed to be non-human guardians of the tower at its base. And also, if you enter it, you got to deal with the wizard, and the wizard, only emerges every so often. And when he does, he kills people left and right, and he commits some horrible act or nothing. Most of the time he's holed up in the tower. So, nobody's, even though there's a significant criminal underworld existing in the city, nobody has the guts to go in and try and rob this tower. But Conan intends to, gets in a bar fight, kills a guy, and decides that night he's going to make his attempt on the tower. Gets there, turns out there's already another thief there who's going to try and rob the tower as well. They team up, go over the wall, which is deceptively simple, into the garden that surrounds the base of the tower, only to be set upon by a pack of lions. Conan kills one, but the other thief uses the dust of the lotus flower blooms. And the lotus flowers are kind of a recurring narcotic / poison that you'll see in like a lot of the Conan stories. And he uses a preparation made from those to dispatch the rest of the pack. They go up to the top of the tower. They're able to like climb it with a rope over the parapet. They're going to work their way down. Of course, in the top room, the other thief is killed effectively immediately by a giant spider. Conan kills the spider and starts working his way down the tower. And we want to stop here before we go any further in the synopsis.
Are we going to spoil it?
No, well, that's okay. That's what I wanted to know. That's what I'm slightly worried about here, because really the next thing is when he encounters what I call the Lovecraftian influence.
Like, subscribe, repost, share everywhere. To see what else we're up to, visit xynobooks.com, xenobooks.com.